Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 49, Setting the Chessboard Up. Last time, we explained how there came to be two people, Seleucus II and Antiochus the Younger, claiming the throne, with a third joining the mix sometime in the future in 245 BCE. However, we only used it as an example of how chaotic the period was, rather than any in-depth discussion. This time, we will explain what was going on behind the scenes to lead to Antiochus the Younger's demise. We'll explore what the political situation looked like and how both wives of Antiochus II reacted to it. While we're seeing off Antiochus the Younger for a second time, we'll also set everything up for the Third Syrian War. This is because the events following Antiochus II's death are closely linked to the upcoming conflict. So, let's get the Hellenistic chessboard ready for a third match. Just remember the rules before we begin. Knights can only move in an L formation, and remember to put Ptolemy back in the square marked Alexandria before any new game starts. Now, we'll have to circle back round to the political motivations of the events that unfolded last time. Bevan notes that one story from the time of the death of Antiochus II has Laodice I dressing someone up as her dead husband to act as if he was still alive, in order to have the impostor make Seleucus II his heir. It reminds me a bit of a story much later in time, when the Norman robber Guiscard pretends a monk called Reichtor is actually Roman Emperor Michael VII in order to have an excuse to invade. But anyway, that isn't our main concern here today. According to Bevan, the Seleukid Empire was now split between the courts of Laodice and Berenice. Yes, Seleucus II was king, but Laodice was the one pulling the strings. Laodice herself was more powerful within the Seleukid realm, but Berenice had friends in high places elsewhere. After all, she had the backing of her brother over in Egypt. This put a spoke in Laodice's plans. Laodice needed to act quickly if she wanted to survive, hence the events that play out in episode 48. With those events out of the way again, we're going to set time moving again and set everything up for Syrian War 3. To do this, we're going to need to talk about Ptolemy III's motivation for war. One version has it that Ptolemy III's motive was revenge for his nephew's death. Alternatively, the war was between Laodice and Berenice themselves. This is Britannica's version, so I assume in this scenario Ptolemy III just weighs in at some point. A source which partially supports the war being due to the deaths of Berenice Syra and Antiochus the Unfortunate states the war can also be called the War of Laodice or the Laodicean War, the former of which Bevan agrees with. Rawlinson's account ties into all of this, as he states Ptolemy III invades in 245 BCE as revenge for the double murders of his sister and nephew, which was carried out by Laodice I with the blessing of her son. Egypt was in a good position to strike against the Seleucids at this time. Moreover, Ptolemy III probably wanted to go on the offensive against his northern neighbours even before the death of Antiochus II. A protracted illness on the latter's part would have made Ptolemy's life a lot easier. When Antiochus II then died, life became easier again, and he didn't actually attack until after Antiochus was already dead. Now, it wasn't just the death of his northern brother-in-law that went the way of Ptolemy III. At this time, Antigonus II was occupied with a revolt in Corinth. There may have been a fight between the Antigonid and Ptolemaic navies around Andros. This may have happened in 246 BCE. However, Antigonus II directed his focus towards Corinth and nothing came of it. For his part, Ptolemy III didn't do anything either, and therefore didn't need to act in the Aegean. The fact that Ptolemy III didn't make a move for several months might also have been caused by Cyrenaica. For those who don't remember, Cyrenaica is a province to the west of Egypt. The actions of Ptolemy's half-uncle Magas, the half-brother of Ptolemy II for those who don't remember, had shown that the western portions of Egypt needed to be secured before any Syrian excursions. As we've seen, Magas had by this time been succeeded by Apama, who was the aunt of Seleucus II. However, Apama had either fallen from grace or died, and the wedding between Berenice II and Ptolemy III had been arranged after Demetrius the Fair took power. Demetrius the Fair was the son of Demetrius I of Macedon, so a sibling of Antigonus II. He had been married to Apama's daughter Berenice II, but began an affair with his mother-in-law. Berenice then agreed to have Demetrius killed, and he died being held by his paramour in her bed. From then, in 249 BCE, a republic acted as regency until Ptolemy III took power in Egypt and married Berenice. To add some needed context here, a Ptolemaic wedding had previously been arranged for her, but Apama had broken this deal and wed her daughter to Demetrius. Berenice now restarted this agreement once she became ruler. Point being, all of this is the long way round of saying Ptolemy married Berenice. Cyrenaica had attempted to remove the family from power, but by 246 BCE Ptolemy III had secured the area due to his wedding to Berenice. The region was allowed autonomy under Berenice, however the wedding in 246 neutralised Cyrenaica. So that's the western flank taken care of. With this wedding, Cyrenaica under his thumb, Antiochus II and Ptolemy II having died and Antigonus II being unable to intervene, all obstacles were out of the way. Grainger notes that Berenice Cyrus' son had a claim to the Seleukid throne, and therefore Berenice could claim the regency. However, Laodice had the upper hand. She either didn't see or wouldn't recognise that a war with Egypt may be on the horizon. As we saw in episode 48, she was with Antiochus II when he died, and with her son, who was declared ruler from the moment his father was dead. She now had a temporal advantage which allowed her to deal with Berenice. This makes sense. Berenice and Antiochus the Unfortunate were all the way east in Antioch. News does take time to travel, after all. Now, Berenice might have taken longer to get news of her husband's death, but she acted decisively when she did. She took charge of some or all of the military and dispatched a naval expedition to Cilicia. She then took control of money stored at Soloi and took it to Antioch. The Cilician satrap Aribazos fled from the city, but died at the hands of bandits in the mountains. Several Asian cities defected to Berenice and began to muster. Forces began to leave their home base and assemble at Antioch. Grainger notes that Berenice now ruled Cilicia and Syria and sent a message to Ptolemy III asking for help. Why? Well, she probably realised that she had no further support she could draw on, and the future looked nebulous with Laodice and Seleucus II trying to remove her from power. Ptolemy III was quick to answer, indicating his readiness for conflict to begin with. Presumably, in this version of events, he leapt on it as the answer to his prayers. A subordinate called Andriskos arrived with an Egyptian naval force, taking over a city. The city was likely Seleucia Pieria, where, if you recall, Seleucus I was buried. Likely as not, the Seleukid military had been given orders not to put up a fight. Seeing as Berenice likely held most of the military under her sway, this makes sense. A second navy then arrived, led by Ptolemy III himself. They stopped at the settlement of Poseidon, and Ptolemy wanted to carry on unopposed. Now, the official narrative was that Ptolemy III had come to see his sister. I assume this is because, then as now, a foreign army marching around on your turf isn't well liked by the people. However, while probably convenient, this lie meant that the force he could plausibly bring was limited. You probably can't explain away a whole army as necessary personal staff, I suppose. Let's take a breather here to talk about timing. The news that Antiochus II had died would have arrived in Antioch between 1 to 2 weeks after the fact, and at least the same amount of time again would have been needed to make it to Alexandria. The moves made by the children of Ptolemy II would have needed 2 to 4 weeks again to unfold. Given that we were in July when Antiochus II died, we're probably in around August or September 246 BCE by this point. Babylonian sources got the news of the transfer of power in August, and record the succession of Seleucus II happening in July. It was during this time interval that Seleucus II and Laodice acted, and the events of episode 48 played out. As we said, Berenice didn't have a lot of backing. Moreover, Seleucus II still had adherents in Syria. Berenice had moved to secure a tenuous power base, but Seleucus' men would be able to make their move once the news of Seleucus II's accession reached them. So, at this point, let's mentally say goodbye to Antiochus the Unfortunate for a second time. Bevan mentions that Berenice's own physician Aristarchus was one of Laodice's men. He notes that she agreed to trust her enemies and Aristarchus, which makes me think her physician lured her out and tricked her. Again, see the betrayal we talked about in episode 48. While all of this was going on, Laodice was consolidating her grip on Anatolia. Incidentally, there's one story saying that Berenice's ladies hid her body, and one of the wounded women acted as Berenice, maintaining the illusion that Berenice and Antiochus were still alive up until Ptolemy III arrived. In my head, this is in order to keep support swelling until the powerful king of Egypt shows up to avoid people just leaving. It reminds me of the story of Egyptian Sultana Shajar ad-Dur, who pretended her husband was still alive to avoid demoralizing the army while Louis IX was rampaging through Egypt on the 7th Crusade in 1249. I also find it a little strange that we've got two stories of pretense after death in one episode. As a quick note here, Bevan claims that Berenice was already being besieged in Daphne when Ptolemy II's death transferred power to Ptolemy III. Remember from previous episodes that this would have been in January 246 BCE. However, this would contradict other chronologies. Regardless, he does agree that Ptolemy III shows up in Syria even before he heard word of his sister and nephew having died. After their deaths, areas which had declared for Berenice now saw joining Ptolemy III as their only choice. Justinus notes that supporting cities went over to Ptolemy III because they were shocked by the cruelty of the deed. So, we've set up the war. From here on in, the story is only going to get more difficult for Seleucus II, in the sense that Rawlinson notes him fighting a losing battle against multiple enemies in his future. As a way of rounding out our discussion of the prelude, the narrative we're going to go with is that Ptolemy III didn't need much of an excuse to spring at the Seleucids. The final straw was his sister encouraging him in, and his sticking around after their deaths. Next time in our narrative, we'll start the bell ringing for round 3. It's the Third Syrian War in 3 generations. Until then, thank you all for listening. For any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for tangent episodes, feel free to reach out at the show's email address. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.